Have you ever been forced to make a life-changing decision in the middle of a crisis? One that not only impacts your family, but completely disrupts your career? This week, I talk with Cynthia Iorio, founder of Monarch Solutions, about how caring for two terminally ill parents at separate times reshaped her identity, both personally and professionally. What started as a daughter stepping in to help quickly became a crash course in caregiving without a guide, without a roadmap, and without a name for what she was doing. In this conversation, Cynthia opens up about what it means to lead through caregiving, how it forced her to apply business skills in the most human way possible, and why we need to stop treating caregiving like a personal issue and start seeing it as a workplace reality. We talk about identity, grief, project management, leadership, and how learning to show yourself compassion in the most uncertain moments can become your greatest strength. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Cynthia. It's so great to have you here. I'm excited for this conversation, and I'd love to start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for having me here. I have been a fan of your work for a really long time. Your insights are wonderful and so relatable, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story and talk a little bit about leadership and what I'm doing in this space. So my name is Cynthia Iorio. I am the founder and managing director of a company called Monarch Solutions, which works with small to medium-sized businesses to help integrate the phenomenon of caregiving into their workforce by supporting employees who are juggling family caregiving, informal caregiving responsibilities, and their jobs and work. This is a passion of mine. It is something that I've come into based on two experiences I had throughout my 25-year-long career, where I had to take a leave and care for each parent who was young and diagnosed with a terminal illness sporadically. So, my career started out of university. I went into marketing and I worked a marketing job for 5 years, and ultimately went back to school to get a degree in journalism because I had this view, this desire, this want to help share stories of the world. And I didn't land in journalism, but I ultimately found about 10 years after I had joined the workforce, I found my passion in project and program management. And so I worked in various positions in IT firms and professional services. I worked for a business aircraft manufacturer in program management. I worked in IT. And the first career disruption that I had was when I was 34 years old, and I got the call from my mom to accompany her to a doctor's appointment later that week. At the time, I was not married. I didn't have any children. And so, of course, I said yes. I had a great relationship with my mother, and I said yes. And what I didn't know was that at the end of that week, we would learn that my mother's stage 2 cancer that she had had 2 years prior, that was supposed to have been kind of eradicated from her body, had now returned and metastasized in her blood, in her lungs, in her bones, and in her brain. And it was a moment that you obviously can't prepare for, and became the first of two, life-changing moments of watching each parent get sick and ultimately pass away.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead if you want to.
No, not at all. I'm just listening and empathizing. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's kind of when I talk about this, I also like to gauge people's reactions because it can be a really heavy topic. And I'm grateful that I'm on the other side of it to have processed it. And I can see it, with gratitude. But I know a lot of people might also be going through this right now. So taking this pause. But so initially in that moment, what I will say is I didn't know in that moment I was becoming a caregiver. I didn't have that. I didn't wear that title. I didn't have that identity. I just kind of went into project and program management gear and saw this 1 year life expectancy that we've been given for my mom in that moment as almost a project. I saw it almost as weirdly, we've been given an opportunity to do whatever time she has left in her life right. And so I made the decision in that moment that I was going to move home and care for her. It was stronger than me. It was a little love and fire and passion. And I had no idea what I was about to jump into. So the first 3 months were of, this trajectory. My mother kind of led the charge. She was the one who was the person responsible for all of her appointments and, how decision making. But after 3 months, she was hospitalized. And that's when the need for me to step in and take on a much bigger role became very clear. I went from being the person who was following my mom her whole life to now needing to lead the discussions with medical professionals and was ripped from my career. I was no longer able to juggle all of the things on my shoulders, and became the be all end all for my mom until she passed away in April that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for everything that you went through. And I know that your own experience has inspired the work that you do today. And I want to get into that in more detail. But I also want to just sort of stay in that moment for a bit and think about how that decision, or maybe even whether there was any pushback, like when you made the decision, I have to leave, right?
Mm,
Uh, it sounds like part of it was this values-based decision to want to spend more time with her and to want to give her the attention that she deserved. But there was also a way in which you felt like I can't do these two things, take care of my mom and do my job at the same time, right? And
right.
something's got to give. So, can you
Yeah.
talk more about that decision and, sort of how it affected your career, conversations that you had with your manager at the time? Like, can you just kind of paint a more vivid picture of what that looked like?
100%. These are the kinds of things that creep up on you. The decision crept up on me. And truthfully, it wasn't even my idea.
Hmm.
It was my manager's idea. So in the workplace, I always took a lot of pride as being a high performer. I was the kind of person who threw herself into her work. I was always someone who wanted to be a part of the team. I would work the extra hours. I would go the extra mile. This was who I was. And so, in those first 3 months of juggling work and care, I would have open conversations with my manager, let him know a little bit what was happening. And I would, I was able to get the flexibility that I needed and ask for the flexibility that I needed to do some work after hours, if you would. And so when my mother was hospitalized, it was a day-to-day kind of trying to figure out what the demands were. And I was on the phone every single day with my manager telling him, it's going to be one more day, and please send home or send me what else I need to do, or I'm trying to find, other resources. And I know these deliverables are for you, are due. And this was back in 2015. I didn't have a laptop. There was no work from home. This was desktop kind of timing. And so it was my manager who was able to see that, this was more and more becoming something that business was suffering and I was starting to suffer. And it was he who said, Cynthia, I'm based in Montreal. He said, there's a compassionate caregiver leave that you can take, that you can get government funding to care for someone who's terminally ill. And your job will be guaranteed here at this company or a job at the same level. This might be something you want to consider. And it was in that moment that I realized, first of all, A, am I a caregiver? I don't think I'm a caregiver. I'm a daughter. And B, um, my boss is open to the idea of me taking some time. And the moment it became an option was the moment for me that I said, "Oh, can I do this? I want to do this. What is that going to look like?" And so it was a new path that I went down. But up until that point, I just wanted to hold on and do well in both areas, be there for my mom and, be there at work. And this is one of the things actually that is informing the job that I do today, is that in this kind of equation of care of, my role and responsibility as somebody who's supporting my mom, the healthcare, their responsibility in caregiving and supporting somebody who's ill, the government's responsibility to have policies in place. It was my employer who was also instrumental in me being able to take the time off that I needed to, and also create an environment where I didn't have to stress or worry about that. So it stopped being, it was because the initiation came from him. It was not a decision of, am I taking a step away from my career and what's that going to look and feel like? It was the permission to step into a new leadership role for my mom.
Oh, that's so interesting to hear you say it that way, because that is, sadly, probably one of the places you'd least expect to get that kind of encouragement, right? I mean, certainly managers are human too, but as the one who initiated that discussion, I think that may be rarer than we would like it to be.
And I think it was, selfishly motivated. He kept having somebody who was on his team calling in every day saying, I can't be there, I can't be there, I can't be there. And so his productivity was suffering and the team dynamic was suffering, and living in that uncertainty, which is so often what caregiving is living day to day in a reactionary state to, at the whims of the healthcare needs of the person you're caring for. And so he kind of took the reins, knowing and understanding the resources that were available, and also having had a little bit of that history and that relationship with me to plant that seed, and also provide this kind of partnership and safe environment where I could take that step away, but he could also get his work done and re-strategize on what needed to be done. So that was, he was selfishly motivated, and I got to get this work done, and she's
Sure.
slowing us down.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense too. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're trying to do in the work that you do today?
Sure. So I was fortunate. So that was the situation with my mom. My mom ultimately ended up passing away 11 months after her diagnosis. And I went back to work, and it was wonderful. And then 6 years after she passed, my father was diagnosed with a terminal illness as well. And because I had done all of the therapy and all of the reflecting, and I had healed from all of that, I went into this need to be a caregiver for my dad. In this situation, it was a much shorter situation, but nonetheless a critical diagnosis. Knowing that there were potentially things that the employer could offer that were available to me. So I was fortunate to be working for Microsoft at this time, or a company that had been bought out by Microsoft. And so I went to look at all the resources. Okay, does Microsoft have a caregiver program? I talked to my manager again. I went and reached out to these resources. And fortunately for me, there were these programs available. But I know that this is, both having worked in the aerospace company and working in big tech, they were the exception, not the rule. And so what I'm doing with Monarch Solutions today is I am empowering small to medium-sized businesses, companies with 100 to 1,000 employees, who don't necessarily have the structures, the financial bandwidth, the breadth of an HR department who can develop these types of policies. I help empower them with getting their employees access to the tools and the resources and the language through a platform that I have, through one-on-one coaching, so that this kind of pressure that is inevitably going to fall on the shoulders of their workforce ends up getting mitigated. Right now, there are in the US upwards of 39 million working caregivers in the US.
Mhm.
And this is a huge burden and a huge responsibility on the workforce. In Canada, we are 6.1 million, but the representation of the population is that 60% of the population is juggling work and care. And it's the kind of responsibility that creeps up on you. There's a fine line between supporting someone, to go to an appointment here or there, and then the huge ongoing pressure and stress of having to help someone who is either aging or has a critical illness or suffering with a disability. And so the goal with Monarch Solutions is to not have to make these employers suffer or ramp up all of their knowledge or become experts in the caregiving space, but to provide that leadership and permission to their workforce at a relatively low lift, and the permission to their employees to access things that would take them a lot longer to potentially access and reinvent the wheel each step of the way.
Mm. And so I love that you're basically concentrating on providing the support and resources to the people who are in these situations from both angles, right? The company and the individual, so that they don't have to do all the research that you've done, right? And I wonder too, because you made a good point about the distinction in some of the caregiving types of activities, right? Like, I don't care for aging parents. I care for two children, right? Their lives are a little bit more predictable. You can kind of work around their school schedule and like what their calendars are going to look like. But to your point, then there are things that might throw you for a loop if it's a diagnosis that comes out of the blue or a crisis that requires a lot more hand holding and support. So when you think about supporting individuals and organizations, I imagine there's a spectrum of kind of it. Do you kind of see yourself in a certain, like, if I'm the person on the caregiving side who's looking for support, do I say I'm kind of like a 2 on a scale of a 1 to 5, right, at this point? Or how do you kind of navigate that spectrum or that distinction?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and the reality is that there are some really amazing frameworks to think about the phenomenon of caregiving, and I really try to get away from calling people caregivers because it's such a title and an identity that is rooted a lot in imagery that is controlled by healthcare and government, which pigeonholes the way we think about what caregivers look like and who they are and what their responsibilities are. Healthcare professionals are not going to talk to you really about the financial responsibilities of paying your parents' visa on time. And needing to know where all of bank accounts are, or taking care of your ailing sister's house when she is hospitalized and you have to have her lawn mowed. Like, healthcare organizations, they don't do that in the marketing. So the phenomenon of caregiving kind of runs this spectrum. From a stage perspective, you can be an expectant caregiver, for example, somebody who knows that they have aging parents and will eventually need to care for somebody. And so there's this kind of preparation, this language around what are the things I need to know. So it's helping individuals realize the things that would be they will eventually be responsible for. And then you have another stage up, which is kind of freshman caregiving, when someone's brand new and they don't even know. So I would help people, using language of, okay, this has just landed on your plate. You are supporting somebody who's going through something challenging. Here's how you can approach this. Here are the strategies on how to approach this, and kind of moves through kind of 6 stages of freshman, then entrenched when you're kind of in it and trying to juggle all the balls. And then you're, a pragmatic stage. You're in a letting go stage and a transitioning stage. And the last stage is kind of you're reflecting back on your caregiving experiences. So there's different needs through different stages, and it's really just providing language and accessibility to people to help situate themselves in this spectrum of care. And the other thing that's really important is also helping people learn how to manage and lead themselves through these stages. When somebody is supporting somebody else, one of the natural propensities is to say, what can I do to help? How can I help you? What can I do? And to go to the doing. A lot of family caregivers are high performers, and they're the ones who will take on a lot. So they go into this kind of doing mode. And what they will often forget is the being mode and how they have to self-regulate and how they have to include themselves in this equation of care. And so providing that perspective, that guidance, that kind of demystifying and breaking apart caregiving using actually business language, using parallels with project management themes, using parallels with leadership themes, helping to talk about it in a way through different toolkits and workshops and stuff that I offer that is a language that they're accustomed to in a professional business workspace. So those are the ways that I help people on this spectrum to make the synapse connections in their brains that they, may otherwise not necessarily have the capacity to.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because there's so much value to what you're describing. And a couple of the things that jump out at me are number one, just normalizing the experience because it is a very intense, like you said, often surprising transition for you. And it's easy to forget that you're not the only one who's ever been through this before, right? That there are people and resources and just different ways of approaching this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, as you said earlier. The other piece that I think is so helpful is focusing on caring for yourself at the same time that you're caring for whomever it is that you're caring for. And I think about this and I'm curious what your personal experience was with this. It sounds like you had a supportive manager, but maybe before that issue came up, if that natural pressure that we put on ourselves to be everything, do everything, especially if you're a high achiever and maybe you've got some perfectionism in you, or maybe you've got some imposter syndrome, that fear that I'm going to do this wrong, that, something bad's going to happen. And so on top of all the stress that you have about whoever it is that you love, that you're trying to support through this, you're also fearing for what are the consequences going to be to my career? And can I afford to take time off? Even if I can get my job back, will I be behind in my career? Right? Like all the mindset stuff that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are no two caregiving situations alike. There are no two situations of care alike. And there are a lot of variables that go into the way we care. There are your own personal capacity. There is the person you're caring for, their want, need, and desire for support, how they handle it, and the condition, if it's a medical condition or if it's just natural aging, or the complexities and the variables that go into that, and it will. When what happened with my mom, because I wasn't attuned to it, because it was the first time that I had kind of been taken out of my life in this way, feeling like the rug had been pulled from underneath my feet, it was a complete dissolution and loss of sense of self and who I was. Mm. It was this breakdown. It challenged everything that I thought I knew about the world. It challenged the amount of control that I thought I had over my life and the outcomes and how it was going to be. It challenged the strengths I thought I had and the weaknesses I thought I had. And so on the other side of it, when everything was said and done, and I talk about the therapy that I did and the work that I did, what I really had to learn was to exercise a self-compassion muscle. I really had to learn how to exercise this perspective of not beating myself up and accepting that I wasn't going to be perfect in these situations, and accepting that the uncertainty and going from, let's say, thriving in a workplace to now surviving, just pure survival mode because you're being asked to react and operate at a certain level, but with an emotional deficit. Uh, that to allow for this to exist and to not beat myself up over it. And so, three of the greatest lessons that I learned out of this, that out of the caregiving with my mom, that I applied with my dad, and I truthfully I apply in everyday work, is one, it's not one person's sole responsibility to care or support someone else. Two, your presence, whether with somebody else or with yourself, is the greatest gift you can offer. And three, we are where we're supposed to be.
Mm.
And these three principles, knowing and understanding that it's not just my responsibility alone. So finding resources as quickly as possible, finding colleagues, finding community for myself in what I'm going through is critical to any kind of crisis type situation. That managing myself and taking those you're talking about, mindset stuff, taking time away to either do some type of meditation or journaling for 3 minutes, even if that's it, getting control over that presence of being with myself and understanding that I can't be a million places at once is critical. And then we are where we're supposed to be, truly coming to the acceptance of, if life were meant to happen any other way than it's happening, then it would. So I have two choices. I can either resist this and be a part of the chaos, or I can sit back and strategize and accept and gain perspective and not just have my perception of the situation. So,
Mm.
there's a lot of uncertain. When you realize that your whole life is uncertain, that you can't control anything, and that making decisions are the illusion of control. Finding the compassion to say, I'm going to do the best I can with the information I have access to today, and then, make a decision, move forward. And if things change, then so too will I change and will I pivot.
Yeah, and I love the mindset shifts that are embedded into what you're saying. And it just makes me think about, even outside of caregiving, people right now are feeling overwhelmed by all of the curveballs that are being thrown at us on a regular basis. Like you said, right? Nothing is predictable. We don't have control over the external forces around us. We only have the ability to control how we respond to it, how we show up in these moments. And I think that, that combined with the natural tendency we have to look for the negative, right? Like we're so self-critical, we're so hard on ourselves, to instead be able to say, like, hey, I am I'm handling it, right? Like this took me by surprise and I'm handling it, right? There is no perfect way to handle it because no one else has been exactly in my shoes at this moment under these circumstances. There's no manual to follow. There are resources we can access. There are things we can do to make it easier, but to really find more intentional practices to give ourselves credit for how much we're doing.
100%. We are, so much of our lives today, I find, is curated. So much of everyone's trying to sell you a solution. Everyone's trying to tell you this is how to go through life, or I'm going to make it easier for you. And sometimes you just have to also accept that life is going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't negate or take away from all of the things that you're doing to help you get through it. And if you wake up in the morning, it means you're getting through it. it might be painful, it might be uncomfortable, but you are getting through it. And, there are things that, for example, that were highlighted for me in the caregiving that were my strengths that I could do, which was, project program management, organization, stakeholder management, risk, all of those things. And there are things that we are all good at. And almost like a parent looking at a report card and only focusing on, if the kid has all 90s and 170 and focusing just on the 70, the flip side is to look at all the 90s, because it's not the thing that you're not good at that's going to help you through. It's the things that you are good at. So leaning into, acknowledging, giving yourself that pat on the back of the things that do light you up, that do make you feel good. Those are the things, the skills in any type of situation, regardless of whether it's, leadership in caregiving or leadership in the office. Those are the things that are going to help get you through. And so angling on and leaning on and giving yourself that check mark is kind of necessary to survival through uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I love that you put business language around it too, because I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm just doing this other thing over here that's personal and feels like it's a distraction from my career, even though there are emotional attachments that we have to the people that we're supporting. But I think it's important to recognize that you are pulling from the same skill set, right? Like you're saying, the project management, all these things, they're not these totally compartmentalized sides of yourself. There's a lot of overlap there, and being able to say, hey, I know how to manage projects, right? I know how to lead. I know how to, have tough conversations. Those kinds of things are going to serve you in the capacity that we're talking about here too.
Absolutely. And if they are not skills that you have, if you're in, let's say, a purely individual contributing engineering type of role, let me tell you, caregiving is going to help you foster those skills. Depending on your caregiving situation, you're going to have to sit potentially in a doctor's office and learn from the doctor about, what's important to them, and communicate symptoms quickly under time pressure, and then take that information and have to go back and share it with Aunt Betty, who doesn't speak that language. And so that's stakeholder management. And then it's, the skill that you need, that if you have to speak with a financial advisor, making sure that you are organized, that you understand the numbers, that you're financially planning, that you're budgeting on behalf of the person you're caring for, on behalf of yourself. Again, you're building that skill. And so, changing the mindset or the framework to looking at the experience you're having as being actually investment in your skills that are ultimately going to be transferable. It shifts the experience from being as devastating as it is, because for sure, it's challenging, to one that's also an opportunity for you to transform, evolve, grow, and, just eventually be better in business and in life.
That's such a powerful perspective, and one that I don't think we necessarily think of in those moments. Wow, Cynthia, this has been such a fantastic conversation. I so appreciate your sharing your own personal story and just the work that you're doing. For people who want more of you, want to learn more about your work and how they can access it, where can they find you?
I have my website, monarchsolutions.com. Monarch is spelled Monarque. I am in Quebec, so it's the French spelling. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Cynthia Iorio. My last name is spelled Iorio. I'm on LinkedIn. And yeah, those are two of the greatest ways to get in touch with me.
Wonderful. I'll make sure those links are in the show notes as well. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.